The sky over Willow Creek was painted with the pale gold of evening when the crowd began to gather in the dusty town square. The sound of chatter, boots scraping, and horses neighing filled the air. The year was 1894. A time when the strong ruled and the desperate survived by sheer will. But today, desperation wore the face of a young widow. Clara Mayfield, holding her baby close against her chest. Her eyes, wide and tearful, searched the crowd for mercy that would not come. Her husband, Thomas, had died 3 months ago in a mining accident, leaving her with nothing but debts and a child too young to understand hunger. The landlord, cruel and greedy, had seized her home. And now the sheriff had ordered an auction, not for land, but for labor. The widow and her baby will be auctioned to pay her debts. The sheriff announced, voice cold as steel. She'll work for whoever wins the bid. The crowd murmured. Some men smirked, others whispered ugly jokes. Clara's arms tightened around her baby boy. She wanted to run, but where could she go? The world had no mercy for a woman alone. The bidding began low. $10 for the widow. A voice shouted. 15. Came another. The sound of numbers rising burned her ears like fire. Each bid was another chain, another reminder that her freedom was gone. She swallowed back tears, praying silently, Lord, please, send someone kind. Then, through the noise, the crowd parted. A man stepped forward, tall, broad-shouldered, and silent. He wore a black hat pulled low and a long duster coat coated with trail dust. His boots were polished but worn. And his eyes, sharp, gray, and cold, scanned the crowd like a hawk. Everyone recognized him instantly. Mason Holt, the millionaire rancher who owned half the land in 3 counties. He was known for 2 things, his wealth and his silence. He never spoke more than he had to, never smiled, and never let anyone close. They said he had lost his wife and unborn child years ago in a fire. And his heart had turned to stone ever since. When he stepped closer, even the sheriff straightened. What's the bid at? He asked, voice deep as thunder. $50, Mr. Holt, the sheriff stammered. 55. Shouted a drunk ranch hand, laughing crudely. Mason turned his eyes on him, a cold, cutting stare that silenced the laughter instantly. Without looking away, he said, $1,000. The crowd gasped. The bidding stopped. $1,000 for a widow and her baby. No one dared speak. Even the sheriff hesitated. Mr. Holt, are you serious? Mason's voice rumbled again, calm and final. I'll take them. For a long moment, silence hung over the square. Clara stood frozen, her heart pounding so loud she could hear it echo. The sheriff cleared his throat, announced the sale. And Mason handed him a stack of bills without blinking. Then, without a word, he stepped up to the widow and looked her in the eyes. You're coming with me, he said quietly. Clara's lips trembled. Sir, I don't understand why. Mason glanced at the baby in her arms. You will, he said, then turned and walked toward his horse. The crowd watched as he lifted her up onto his wagon, careful not to startle the crying baby. No one dared laugh or whisper now. The road out of Willow Creek was long and silent. Clara sat on one side of the wagon, her baby asleep against her shoulder, while Mason drove in silence. She wanted to thank him, but the words caught in her throat. Finally, she said, You didn't have to do that. I'm just a poor widow. I can work to repay you. Mason cut her off, his voice low but kind. I didn't buy you to own you, ma'am. I bought your freedom. She blinked, confused. Freedom. He nodded. No one's going to hurt you or your boy again. You'll stay on my ranch. Help where you can. Eat when you're hungry. That's all. Tears welled in her eyes. For months, she had prayed for mercy. And now a stranger, a man rumored to have no heart, had given it freely. As the wagon climbed the hill overlooking Mason's vast ranch, the sun dipped behind the mountains, setting the sky ablaze in crimson and gold. Clara looked at the horizon and whispered, Thank you, Mr. Holt. Mason didn't respond right away, his hands tightening on the reins. Finally, he said softly, "Don't thank me yet. Sometimes freedom's harder than chains." When they reached the ranch, a group of ranch hands greeted them with curious eyes. Mason helped Clara down and gestured to a small cabin near the stables. "You and the boy can stay there. It's not much, but it's safe." She looked at him, her eyes shining with gratitude. "It's more than I've had in months." Mason turned to leave but paused at the doorway. "Rest tonight. Tomorrow, we'll talk about what comes next." That night, as the stars spread like diamonds over the quiet plains, Clara sat by the window, holding her sleeping baby. In the distance, she saw the faint light from Mason's house on the hill. The lonely glow of a man who had everything yet nothing. Something stirred in her heart, something fragile and warm. Maybe, just maybe, fate had brought them together for more than mercy. As the night deepened, she whispered to herself, "Maybe tomorrow things will finally begin to change." The morning sun stretched its golden fingers across the vast fields of the Holt Ranch. Dew glistened on the tall grass, and the soft whinny of horses echoed in the distance. Clara woke before dawn, her baby still asleep. And for a brief moment, she forgot the pain of yesterday. The little cabin smelled of fresh bread. Someone had left it by her door with a note that read, "For you and the boy. M.H." She smiled faintly, feeling warmth creep into her chest for the first time in months. As the sun climbed higher, she stepped outside. The ranch was alive with movement, men saddling horses, cows being herded, and workers calling out to one another. Everything here had order and purpose. Everything except her. She felt like a misplaced shadow. That was when she saw him, Mason Holt, standing by the corral. Tall and silent, feeding his prized stallion. The wind lifted his coat, and the morning light glinted off his silver spurs. He looked powerful, commanding, and heartbreakingly alone. When he noticed her watching, he tipped his hat slightly. "Mornin', Mrs. Mayfield." She stepped closer, holding her baby. "Good morning, Mr. Holt. I just wanted to thank you again for everything." He nodded. "You don't owe me thanks. Just honesty and hard work." She smiled softly. "Then you'll have both." Over the next few weeks, life on the ranch found its rhythm. Clara helped in the kitchen, mended clothes, and sometimes sang lullabies that drifted through the open windows at night. The ranch hands grew fond of her kindness, and even the roughest cowboys softened when her baby giggled. Mason watched quietly from afar. He didn't say much, but his eyes often followed her, not with desire, but with something deeper. Something like remembrance. He would sit on his porch at dusk, whiskey in hand, staring at the horizon as if waiting for ghosts to fade. One evening, the sky turned gray with the promise of rain. Clara saw Mason out by the barn, struggling to fix a broken beam. Without thinking, she ran through the mud to help. "You'll hurt yourself," she cried. He looked at her sharply, his hair damp from sweat and rain. "Go back inside, ma'am. I can't just watch you do this alone." He paused, surprised by her tone. For a moment, something flickered in his eyes, pain, maybe. Then, quietly, he said, "You sound like her." "Who?" Clara asked. He swallowed hard, turning away. "My wife." She used to say the same thing. The storm rolled in fast. Thunder cracked overhead, and the rain came down in sheets. They rushed inside the barn, breathless. Mason's voice broke through the roar. "Her name was Evelyn. She died 6 years ago. House fire took her. And our child." His jaw tightened, and his eyes grew distant. "I built this ranch for them. But when they were gone, I buried myself in work and walls. No one's been inside my house since." Clara's heart ached. She saw, behind the stoic cowboy, a broken man trapped in grief. She took a small step closer. "You saved me, Mr. Holt. Maybe it's time someone saved you too." He looked at her then, truly looked, into her eyes, full of empathy and quiet strength. For the first time in years, Mason felt something stir inside him. Fragile as dawn light breaking through storm clouds. Days passed. The air between them grew warm, filled with soft glances and unspoken words. He'd bring her coffee in the mornings. She'd leave flowers by his porch. The ranch hands whispered that the cold-hearted cowboy was finally thawing. One afternoon, tragedy struck again. A wild stallion broke free, charging through the paddock where Clara was hanging laundry. The animal reared, hooves slashing through the air. Without hesitation, Mason sprinted forward, shoving her and the baby out of harm's way. The stallion's hoof struck his shoulder, throwing him hard to the ground. Clara screamed, rushing to him. Blood trickled down his arm, but he gritted his teeth and stood. "You okay?" he rasped. Tears streamed down her face. "You could have been killed." He smiled weakly. "I've been dead for years, Clara. You and that little boy brought me back." Later that night, Clara tended his wound by lamplight. Silence filled the small room, heavy and intimate. Mason watched her hands move gently, his heart pounding with something he hadn't felt since before the fire: peace. "Clara," he said softly, "you don't have to stay here if you don't want to." She looked up, eyes glistening. "And where would I go? You gave me and my son a home. Maybe it's time we give you one too." He blinked, the words hitting deeper than he expected. "You'd want to stay here with me?" She smiled through tears. "You didn't just buy our freedom, Mason. You gave us hope. And maybe that's something we can share." The next morning, as dawn broke over the ranch, Clara stood beside Mason on the porch, the baby in her arms. The sky burned with gold, and the wind carried the scent of wildflowers. Mason looked at them. The woman who had walked into his emptiness and filled it with light. And for the first time in years, he smiled. A real, quiet, grateful smile. He took the baby gently from her arms and whispered, "Welcome home, son." The ranch hands cheered when word spread that Mason Holt, the man who'd sworn never to love again, had married the widow he once bought to save. The ranch that had been built out of sorrow now echoed with laughter, lullabies, and life. Sometimes fate doesn't bring people together by chance. Sometimes it breaks them first, so they can rebuild each other stronger. As the sun set over Holt Ranch, Mason held Clara close and whispered, "Guess I didn't just buy freedom that day. I bought my second chance."